Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another week of Creating Work and Working Creatively, an AMP music program provided by Finnish Arts. Alas, we are coming to the last few sessions of this open online training part of the program. But before we do, we have some excellent guests to chat about all things creative and music, whether that be in art, music, or working in the creative sector within a multitude of realms. This week, I'm joined by my good friend, Laura Jonsson, the promotion manager for Finnish independent record label PME, and excellent DJ, Krash Bandicute. We're going to be discussing how to turn a hobby and a passion into a profession and the realities of trying to do so and how it can happen. But before we get started, I would like to formally introduce Laura. So welcome, Laura.
Hi.
So to start, we always do this little intro and a little summary, but I think it's always good to get a better idea of who you are from yourself and what you do. So with that in mind, would you like to elaborate a little bit on what it is you do at PME Records and what drove you to pursue a career in music?
Yes, I'd like to comment also. I was super stoked about the jingle. I was just like kind of partying along.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm glad you like it.
I'm pumped up to do my intro now. So yeah, my name is Laura Jonsson, and I work for the independent label PME Records. I've been there a year and a half, and I've been in the record label industry for almost 4 years now altogether. At PME, I work as a promotion manager, which means that I do PR for pretty much half our roster, which is about 15 artists. We're almost up at 30 artists right now. And my good colleague, Sara Everi, head of marketing, does the rest of our artists. So she also has about 15 artists. And my history with record labels is that I've been working at Playground Music before PME, which is a record label and distributor. Before that, I was interning at Solity Music, which is a small Helsinki-based indie label. And before that, I was studying event management.
Interesting. I didn't know all of that. And we've been friends for, 3 years? I'm awful, I tell you. Awful. Excellent. And what about, let's talk a little bit about what got you into your career in music. What were like some kind of first steps that you took or specific moments that made you want to do this?
So during high school, which is, I think it's secondary school, and I started thinking about like what I wanted to do afterwards. There was quite a lot of pressure about like getting like an adult kind of job, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor or something in economics. At least at my school, it was very popular to go towards those careers, and I felt very uncomfortable with that. But then again, I did not have any answers about like what I actually wanted to do. I just knew that I didn't want to do what everyone else was doing. It felt so boring. And I kind of started thinking about like applying for psychology, and I eventually did. I applied for psychology at the University of Edinburgh, Glasgow, and Aberdeen, and got in. But I applied with a gap year. So I had like 1 year to kind of just have fun and think about it. And at the end of my gap year, I realized that psychology is not what I want to make a career out of.
Yeah.
So I just kind of sat down and thought about it a little bit and realized that I really love music. It was also the age that I started going to gigs when I turned 18. You could go to pubs and bars and concerts that you couldn't go to before.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized that I want to work in that world. I wasn't quite sure what it meant at that point because I wasn't really formally introduced to like club culture. When I was 18 or 19, I just went to like rock and indie gigs mostly.
Yeah.
And then I remember talking to one of my teachers who recommended event management. It's actually like a different word in Finnish. It's called kulttuurituottaja, which means producer of culture, which I kind of prefer. I think event management is very like small, and producer of culture sounds a lot better.
It sounds like it kind of should sit in a boardroom alone.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I think we have a very similar kind of introduction to it in that regard. Like we obviously both love music and have done for a long time, but I also felt, like, I remember my one of the head teachers at school saying, if you don't go to university and get a degree, you're never going to get a job. And that feeling, that pressure to do something traditional, shall we say, in like terms of work, and then going to university and doing a traditional degree only to find out wasn't interested at all. But what it did was it like opened the door to going out, like you say, to clubbing and meeting like-minded folks. And then I think kind of not being able to fully scratch that itch by just going out clubbing and socializing, I always wanted something a little bit more from it. And I'm glad that you feel the same, because this is a perfect opportunity to elaborate on that and show people how they can potentially achieve that if they are feeling slightly adrift or unsure what they want to do coming out of school or whatnot.
I think like with when I started studying event management, I went to quite a few like school parties. I just didn't feel like it was my thing, but we did have like a small club, like a literal nightclub for our school. And I went there once or twice, and I remember thinking that this is just, it could be so much better. Like, why does this party like suck so hard? It's so bad. And then that kind of like awoke the thought, like there's probably someone doing better club nights somewhere. And then I started getting interested. Okay, where can I find these like club nights? And then I started kind of attending them more and more. But I remember thinking that there's a way of doing this better.
I think it's always, without it sounding too stereotypical, but that is always kind of the way it goes, like in the same way, whether it be being creative in the traditional form of like making art or music or something, or even DJing, as well, being like, oh yeah, I hear what you're doing. Oh, I would do it this way. And that's something I want to try and achieve. But we spoke a little bit last week about your journey into full-time work within music. And we have just now as well. But it kind of, how did it happen after the event management degree? Where like what changed from that to then looking at interning at a record label?
I actually started hustling before I even graduated. So it's a 4-year study, and during my 3rd year, I was studying abroad in the Czech Republic.
Oh, wow.
And I was, I think it's called specializing or like focusing on music management there. And also took some theater courses, including circus skills, as the clown I am. However, my teacher sent me an email telling me about like an internship at a record label. I told her that I would be very interested in like music related things or internships. And she told me that there's like a spot available at Soliti Music, which is like this Finnish, Italian, English small label run by Nick Ciani. And I got the internship, and it was a 3-month internship, which I started right when I got back from the Czech Republic. And I was so intimidated. Also, like one thing that happened when I applied for the internship is that I did not figure out whether Nick Ciani spoke Finnish or not. So I sent the email in Finnish, and he was English. So do your research. However, my teacher had recommended me to him, so I got off the hook. But find out the language.
I guess that's a big one. That's definitely a big one. For sure. And so then from the internship, how did the next opportunities come around?
So the internship that I did at Soliti Music was 3 months, and it was at the same office as Playground Music was. So I was kind of already getting to know them a bit. I sat in like the room next to them and just kind of became friends. And then I asked, because I was supposed to do a 6-month internship altogether. So I was planning on doing 3 months at Soliti and 3 months somewhere else. And then I ended up getting the internship at Playground Music. So I did my next 3 months there. And then one of the employees at Playground Music quit when my internship was ending.
Wow.
Therefore, I was there. Yes, I got hired. It was really lucky. And I was just like at the right time, or at the right place at the right time. And it ended up getting hired while I still had 1 year of school left.
Oh wow!
So I was doing like a full-time job with school, technically full-time school. So I was really working hard and writing my. I'm a bit unsure if it's thesis, but like my final paper from school.
Yeah.
And I was also doing radio during the weekends. So I was getting quite familiar with the term being burned out from a very
early age.
Yeah. Now I'm a lot better at it. I know what to look out for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was working really hard because I think I had like the same kind of drive that a lot of young people have when they start out in the business. They want to do everything at the same time and think that every opportunity that you say no to is like completely missed forever. And you won't get like a job or you won't meet the right people if you don't say yes. And that's just not true. So like if I could give one tip to anyone younger, like going into the industry, you don't have to say yes to every single project because you will you'll find your way anyways. So just remember to rest, because I didn't.
We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, Genevieve Taylor. She works in PR as well. And that was one of the big things that we talked about, was the fact that you don't have to say yes to everything. And like you said, there's a definite culture around thinking, if I say no to this, that opportunity is gone forever. And that's me essentially deliberately taking a step away from what I want. But it's not. It's sidestepping something that potentially you won't have the energy to do to your full extent anyway. And it could then serve you worse in the long run if you're trying to do something where you're too, like you say, burnt out or tired, where you can't give your full attention to it. So the power of no is definitely such an important tool to have.
And looking back, there's a lot of things I could have said no and wouldn't have like changed anything. So I like recommend just saying yes to the things that will actually bring you joy and something like worthwhile.
Exactly.
I've been volunteering at so many like places I don't need to volunteer at, and saying like, "Oh, I'll help you out."
You're preaching to the converted with me. I mean, I'm the exact same. It's definitely something that I think I notice now more and more as I like become more comfortable doing what I want to do in this kind of circus and industry that we're in. And like you said, I think a really important point is the things that you maybe thought, oh, this was, this was really important, and it wasn't necessarily something that you were passionate about at the time, but you took as an opportunity, hasn't actually done much to serve to lead you to where you are now.
Yes.
And I think that especially aspiring producers, DJs, or in any work, it's really important to kind of hold your worth. And again, another person spoke to, Ira, recently, was saying that is like knowing your worth in these moments and knowing that you do have something to provide, and that holding on to that is a sign of legitimacy that a lot of people look for anyway, and who have been in the business for a long time, Sometimes I think I think it's great to take opportunities when they're there. And I guess there's also, like a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to say no in certain aspects, whether it be financially or for other reasons. But if you have the opportunity to, just like you say, to focus on what it is that makes you happy and the passion that you have in the creative field, then definitely try and exercise that as much as possible.
I also want to comment on the part where you said knowing your worth. It's like a very abstract thing, because in the end, I learned my worth through those projects, in a sense. So in a way, they gave me something I did later on know what to say, or like what I could say no and what I could say yes to. So it is a learning process. And after those horrible projects and volunteerings and everything, I know my worth now. So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's it. I think, it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that regard. Like you don't get the experience without the experience. That's very vapid.
To quote Miley Cyrus, everybody has those days.
Well, there we go.
Everybody makes mistakes. So I've been there.
No, yeah. So speaking of, you mentioned when we talked last week, you mentioned a little bit about being referred for jobs by women, but the hiring was done pretty much exclusively by men.
Yes.
This is still a huge issue, a major issue, probably, you know, and where hierarchies within the industry and obviously globally are completely imbalanced. And as much as we like to think that there is change happening, it's still very much like a white male-led balance of power in all of these upper positions. From your experience, do you have any advice for others who are entering into the field from your past experience? And if you could look at your, you know, speak to your former self in that regard.
I feel like I let my insecurities speak for me for way too long. I think it kind of stems from the time when you were 13, 14 and wearing a Guns N' Roses shirt and someone asked, well, name 3 albums. And you're like, I don't know, I know 2 and I really like them. So I don't know. Yeah. That kind of haunted me for quite a long time. So just kind of undervaluing your own knowledge, thinking that you don't know as much as the people in the same room where you're sitting. And yeah, I think like, well, one advice, like, which is kind of like a bit later on, is if you're at a point where you can refer someone or like try to like help in the hiring process and like tell them to look at non-men or like people of color, queer people, it's definitely worth like speaking up and like, have you even thought about this person? Do you know they exist? Like they're doing great work at this place. Like, what about them? But yeah, I have been referred to all my jobs by women and then been hired by men. And it's the structure that we live in right now. At least in Finland, there's barely any women who own labels. I'm talking like a little bit like bigger labels. We have a lot of amazing women who do like smaller labels, but if I'm talking about like majors and more like bigger independents, we don't have that many women in deciding positions. But looking forward to that. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And I think we are like, I'm seeing this, it's the kind of glacial shift, but it is changing a lot. It has changed a lot in the last 10 years, but there's still a hell of a way to go. And especially in the UK is I think is slightly more progressive in some respects, but still, again, it's the same, you know, like the structures are still there and there still needs to be a lot of work done. And I think the point you made about not focusing on your insecurities is a really vital one. I think, you know, society only tries to kind of cement those insecurities further. So trying to do yourself a favor by not letting yourself do all of that work anyway, you know.
And I think about like imposter syndrome quite a lot. I think a lot of people, if not everyone, suffers from it from time to time. But I like to think about like reverse imposter syndrome, that I think that I'm more knowledgeable than anyone here. And I am better than anyone here. And I know more about business than anyone here, which might not be true. But if I like tell myself these things and trying to like build up a role that I don't feel comfortable taking, then it feels easier to kind of like fake it till you make it. And that's actually been like a slogan of mine with a friend that is also in the business, that we try to fake it till we make it, because it's a lot about that. Just faking being confident when you're doing a presentation, just stand up tall and look people in the eye when you're talking to them. And that's definitely something I couldn't do when I was 14 and in like what's under high school, what's before high school?
Primary school.
So fake it till you make it.
And then obviously through exercising that and kind of doing that, you build that experience and that confidence, so it becomes less and less about faking it anyway over time, because you get more and more used to being in those situations and finding out, oh, lo and behold, I do have the knowledge now and I do have the experience and the confidence. Coinciding with your work with record labels, you were and are still very heavily involved in radio. You mentioned previously a little bit about that. I know you've experience with both commercial and independent community radio, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about both and whether your experiences of each have helped you in your career, and what your experiences of what your own personal experiences of each are and how they differ?
So when I think it was in 2017, one of my friends who was a longtime host for this show called Kultabassokerho, or short KBK, which is like the word means Golden Bass Club.
Okay.
And it's a specialty show for Finnish rap music.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So this friend of mine, he asked me if I would be interested in joining that, like with hosting them. Hosting the radio show with them.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I said yes. It was one of the biggest shows on the radio station at the time, and pretty much until the radio station decided to go completely commercial. Mm. And we did the radio show on Saturdays for 2 hours every afternoon. And it was amazing. It was so much fun. And that I did that for about 2 years. And then the radio station called Bassoradio decided to quit all the like kind of specialty shows and go completely commercial. So they would only play pop or only
Sure.
like, yeah. And then all their shows got cut off, which is really sad. And like I did like the small video montage. So there's like small clips of like the last episode of the show. We had over 100 people show up to like pay respects. The show went on for over 10 years, which I was part, like I did 2 years of that show.
Wow.
And it was a really like big thing when it ended. And there was like news pieces of it in like Finland's biggest media that the most popular rap show in Finland is quitting. And it was a really sad day, but also amazing to see like all the people come together, because like Finnish rap in Finland is really big. It's one of the like the biggest genres.
Really?
Yeah. And then when Bassoradio quit, suddenly there were over 100 DJs without a home.
Yeah, I bet.
And then Ida Radio filled the gap.
Yeah.
So Ida Radio is originally based in Tallinn. And then the Helsinki kind of home base started a few months after Bassoradio stopped the shows. And then I started doing my own show there, which is more focused on electronic music. I don't speak during my shows that much because I get nervous. And it's weird because I've been talking in a mic to the entire population of Finland for 2 years.
Yeah.
But when I play electronic music for like, I don't know, 12 people, I'm like, hi, my name is Krash Bandicute. Welcome to Vanitas.
Yeah, like saying the same buzz statements over and over that I always promise myself I will never say on the radio again. And I go, so that's like the big one that I can't never not say anymore.
I got when I did the radio for KBK, the radio show, I got feedback for using the word like, but in Finnish, which is niinku. And it's been really hard to get rid of that because you don't notice that you say it. But anyways, I started at Ida Helsinki with Vanitas, which is my radio show there. I do it once a month for 1 hour, which I think is like the perfect amount for me because I'm quite busy with work and I'm very tired nowadays. Also, just because COVID started and I haven't been to clubs almost at all, I don't feel that much inspiration anymore in finding club music. So once a month is like the perfect amount for me.
And it's nice to be able to condense it into an hour because an hour feels really manageable in comparison to 2. Like it feels like a huge, well, I mean, it's exactly double, but other than the obvious
nice
fact,
math.
it just is, thanks. It's just, it feels like such a bigger task to program a show because you have a lot longer, like you can't just go in and, I don't know, like you could play 2 hours of very fast, specific something if that's what you're into, but like you said, the clubs aren't open. And you're not finding, like I remember, like it was the same for us here with the clubs closed. Like I wasn't really interested in finding new music either because I didn't really have an outlet for it. And then trying to do that, other than like radio, but it still doesn't feel the same, because you're not interacting with people whilst that music's playing. And
Exactly.
I think that's one of the comparisons maybe that we can make between Basso and Ida is like you say, is the reach that that the hip hop show had in comparison to Ida, which although is maybe, I don't know, maybe your experience is different, but I feel like with community radio, there's a lot more support because those running it are in a very much closer, similar position
Yes.
to you than
Yes.
say the like the board at Basso or something like that, where they're very at arm's length from what's actually going on day to day in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier about like the Guns N' Roses shirt syndrome, about like people asking you about, well, do you know this album and who produced this and this? Imagine like being like a 13-year-old girl wearing a band shirt versus being a little bit over a 20-year-old woman on national radio talking about domestic music that pretty much mostly men listen to.
Yeah.
So it was quite a difficult position to be in. I had a lot of haters, to say at least, and I think like that kind of prepared me for, in a way, like the real world about like not kind of like stepping out of my bubble, because I'm very comfortable in my like Helsinki bubble, but suddenly I was getting like messages from all across Finland, which is quite different. Also, if I compare like Vanitas, which is my show on Ida Radio, and Kultabassokerho, KBK, which was the show on Bassoradio, the preparation for the 2-hour show was way more than the one I do now for the online radio, because it was 2 hours every Saturday. We would invite an artist over for interviews, which meant that it would be the production of inviting the artist and getting their pictures for social media and posting it on social media, and looking up their discography and what they've done, reading every news article so you knew what to ask them, listening to their upcoming album so you knew what to ask about the upcoming album, and then holding a conversation that's interesting for other people for over 2 hours.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of mental work.
And with let alone without the, like you say, the pressure or the the pressure and this certain negative aspects that come from being a woman presenting a show that is predominantly listened to by men who probably have a lot of things to say about that, good and bad. And then also the other aspect of it is that you're also a lot of the times, like in terms of availability for interviews and preparation and stuff like that, you might be preparing a guest that's not on for 3 weeks, but you're doing so 3 weeks prior to the show, so you're juggling like multiple timelines because it's weekly. It's not always that you can just meet up with that guest on the days leading up to their show. You might have to meet them 2 weeks before or something like that. And so you're juggling all those other aspects. And then with Vanitas on Ida, you're able to, curate a playlist of stuff that you want to play. It doesn't even necessarily, like, because it's community radio and there's, like you say, less of a listenership live, there's way less pressure. You can just turn up with, these are some of my favorite songs, and it can be a DJ set more than like a producer.
Absolutely. Yes. And if I kind of try to wrap it up with my work today, I now know what radios actually need in press releases, because I did radio. And I've kind of seen both sides. So I try to keep that in mind whenever I'm sending a press release for someone who would probably play it on radio, or if I'm sending a track to a DJ, what kind of press release they might need, or do they just need a Dropbox link in their like Facebook Messenger, or I try to take everything that I've learned from the past years and try to make something smart out of it. Because every person that you're sending music to wants to receive it in a different way and needs to receive it in a different way. What you send to medias is not the same that you send to radios. And I've learned that through my radio work, and I feel like I'm way better at it because I know what it feels like to be at the receiving end of the press release. I think that's also something that I didn't really experience until I started running Redstone Press, because when we first started running the record label, we'd be sending out the EPs to people,
and I'd be sending it out as like a blanket copy and paste sort of vibe to all different outlets and whatnot. And then over time, getting to know people who work at those outlets, they tell you, oh, this is how we like to receive it. Or then in turn, us starting to receive demos from other producers as we gain a bit of a name for ourselves, you start to realize how you want to receive that information. And I think there's so many different ways of doing it, but the one that really hit me was the kind of, when you're sending it to press or print or media in that regard, it's so businesslike. It's so straight to the point. It's so like almost cutthroat. And then sending it to an individual, it's totally different. You're wanting to create a little bit of a repertoire with that person, let them know that you're interested in them as a person. That's why you're actually sending them the music in the first place, because you're sharing it because you love what they do. And that's really important as well, because it's really easy now to notice the difference between someone who's taken a bit of time and care over thinking, how am I going to promote this, shall we say, and someone who goes, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to send it out and hope that the music does the talking, which it doesn't always do nowadays, because people are getting so much information all the time that it needs to catch your attention some way.
Yes, absolutely. But yes, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, I'm just aware of the time and we are halfway through already, my goodness. So I would like to, before we dive a bit more into career development and radio, I would like us to watch a little video that you've made that kind of sums up you and what you get up to in the Finnish dance music scene. So Steve, if you would like to play that little snippet for us, and then we'll carry on having a chat.
Live at Addy Valley at 12 o'clock with Krash Bandicute.
Here's me and my DJ partner Malin Nyqvist. We DJ together, and it's so much fun, as you can see. Here I'm teaching my friend Ama to DJ.
I love that video so much. I think that perfectly sums you up in my eyes as well. That's kind of how I associate you and my memory of like when we first met at Horst. And I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of a clip of us dancing to Gabriella Ganza in that at Horst, actually.
Yeah.
It's come full circle. Look at us now. Look at us.
Yeah.
But also as well, I want to give a little bit of a more detailed musical background of yours. So we're just going to dive straight in again to another little media break. And this is a snippet of one of your recent Vanitas shows on Ida Radio. And it is, I think, just a perfect sum up of you. Well, in my eyes, you musically, but you are obviously way wider, as the previous video has shown.
Did you just call me wide?
No, wider. No. But this is definitely like, this is how I see you musically. But yeah, anyway, if Steve, you could take this away and we'll play a few minutes of this. Well, that wasn't the right thing, but we are aware of that. What we'll do is we will show, what we'll do is we'll, at the end of the session, we'll do the Vanitas show mix, because I feel like now this will be just like 10 minutes of people watching different videos, and I'd rather we talked a little bit. So Steve, we'll get the Mixcloud link up at the end of the show, if that's all right.
But that was a video of Ida Helsinki.
Yes, that was a video of Ida Helsinki, for anyone who didn't know. And that also, that video does include a little bit from Basso in the last days of the KBK show, right? As well.
No, it's a different clip.
It's a different clip. Oh my God. I'm getting confused as well. See, this is it's throwing me. It's throwing me.
Tried to learn how to edit videos. So the sound design is awful, but I think like it's okay.
It's DIY.
Yeah. I watched a YouTube like tutorial on how to edit videos. So I'm just like putting stuff
it's brilliant.
in the program.
I wouldn't have known. I can't do it. So you're definitely one step ahead of me. Well, we've actually covered a little bit about the pros and cons of commercial and community radio. So I think maybe we can just talk a little bit more about career development and the role of record labels within that development, because that's something that you're heavily involved in at the moment, and you have been for a while. So you work for PME Records, which is the biggest independent record label in Finland. With the kind of rise recently, especially in the last 2 years since the pandemic, of self-releasing and the changing landscape around releasing music, how do you see the role of record labels these days?
There's definitely like talk about record labels being a dying species with digital aggregators coming along, and a lot of artists being able to release their own music by themselves through that. And I think it's a great way of starting out to release music. I think everyone should like release their music or like their debut EP, single, album on their own. I think it's a really great learning process. I still think that record labels are very much needed if you want to start building something bigger, because in the end, there's quite a lot of work that goes into a release that is planning on going worldwide. As a record label, we do offer A&R services, so you have someone to talk with about the record, what it sounds like, about lyrics, album covers, promo pictures. We help out with all those things. We look for any graphic designers that you might like, or photographers. We help out with booking a studio, kind of what the visual looks like, all the videos and video teasers and Spotify Canvas videos that are like the videos that replay on Spotify. We do playlist pitching for all like digital, what's it called? DSPs.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of things that one needs to do if the release is like planning on actually like going somewhere. And that's not, I'm not in any way saying that it couldn't be able or wouldn't be able to go there on its own. But I think it's way more stress-free for the artist to have someone to help for the artist to have someone that is able to give advice and help out in the project and create a timeline for you and do press releases and like have the emails for all the media outlets. Just
that's it.
Everything.
I think, you know, like on a kind of holistic vibe, it gives the artist so much space to focus on the art that they're producing and less be kind of tied down by the ins and outs that are actually very, very time consuming in all aspects of creating a successful release. And having someone there who has all of those resources at their fingertips and is able to, through their ongoing relationships with different media platforms, through the record label, are able to put that piece of work, that piece of art into someone's hands, and it will most likely to be seen earlier than per se if it's done as a self-release. That's not exclusively the case, because also these things aren't ever definite. You know, certain journalists like certain music, and they may not, you know, you may be like, listen, this is great and we love it, and you send it out and it just isn't that flavor of the week. It doesn't get picked up because for another major reason, maybe it's a huge week of releases, you know, maybe Adele's releasing an album or something like that, and it washes out all of the other releases that week because that's the big drama piece that everyone wants to talk about. But in terms of giving, from our experience as well as Redstone Press, like, we want to be able to give that person that first step, to give them the confidence, as well as, you know, saying, listen, we're signing you because we believe in what you're doing. And that then comes back to this kind of imposter syndrome sort of thing. You're able to somewhat lessen that for someone by you know, like, I don't like think that my opinion matters at all, but if it helps to give someone the confidence they need to make the art that they really want to make and produce the best work that they can, then great, I'm all for it. But I think that's a really interesting thing, because I you know, like, it definitely does keep me up at night when I think about record labels in a death slide, because I am still very much enjoying and trying to expand the record label that I run. But you know, it's a reality that we have to take stock of, and how, as a record label, you can potentially adapt to it as well.
Exactly.
And as you change, you can change the way you do things so that it's more of a what's the word? A kind of a two-way street with the person that you're working with. They can be more hands-on with a lot of the aspects of the release. That's what we're trying to do now, because obviously, like, the worry is that people will go, well, we don't really, you know, we can do this ourselves. And I still want to work with people. I want to create a family of artists on the label and create an environment where people feel comfortable to be able to say, oh, I want to do this. How do you feel? Let's do it together, with the resources you have. But also, I'm interested in your own input on what you think about my work, and vice versa. For an emerging artist who feels maybe ready to take that first step into releasing music and maybe doesn't want to self-release, what advice would you have for them in terms of approaching a record label, if you do have any at all?
I do think that it's really good to think about your own image, like, quite early on, what you look like outside. And I'm not talking about like looks, just like if you've ever released anything, I think that's really good. If you have social media, what it looks like, how you present yourself. Do you have any gigs? Are people like hosting gigs interested in you? Are you visible in any way? If you're sending a demo to a label, I recommend to keep it short and sweet. For example, we get a lot of demos, lots, on Facebook Messenger and on Instagram. I recommend that you send an email. That's where we spend most of our day. And try to make it as short as possible. We're talking like 1 to 3 sentences. This is who I am and this is what I do. And then a link that's not a download link. So a SoundCloud or a Mixcloud or a YouTube link. Streaming. And then leave it at that. You can follow up, but we've probably seen it.
Yeah.
I know it's sometimes it seems quite heartbreaking, but a lot of the times we don't have the capacity to go through all the demos because there's hundreds and hundreds. So I feel like if a label is doing what they're supposed to do, which is being very active and listening in what's happening around them, a label will be able to scout you.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's pretty much what we do most of the time. We don't most of the time we don't find artists through demos. We find them through seeing them on social media or seeing them at gigs. We do like very old school scouting because that's, and also by hearsay. If someone's saying, "Have you heard them? Have you heard this new track?" That's really big. So talk about your music. Make your friends talk about your music because then it will spread at some point.
Yeah,
to a label.
That's really interesting. I think that's something that we also, you know, like I have my like dream list of people that I would love to release on the label, and then through that dream list and the affiliated people who I notice interact with those folks, or the people like within the industry that I think are doing amazing things, you know, like if they're collaborating with people, then I'm checking out those people they're collaborating with. And then through the grapevine, like you say, like people are talking about this artist or this musician and they're doing this really cool thing no one's seen before or heard before. It piques your interest in a way that maybe a demo won't. And it's harsh, but it's the honest truth, because at the same time, it's as much as it's a passion of ours, which is music, it's a business too, and it has to be sustainable, and it has to be something that works for the record label, in terms of the record label has to survive, to put it bluntly, you know, like it still has to be profitable maybe, but it has to at least be sustainable financially for the record label to invest. And so usually, like if you are working in promotion / A&R, your opinion is the kind of qualifying factor at the end of the day. And so if you are being interested by someone, it's more likely that will go the full distance and find a release at the label, so to speak. So I also want to discuss the kind of opportunities that arise working for a solely music-based job. For example, when we first met at Horst Music Festival, it was a music lab that was like a week-long residential group of workshops. Every day there was loads of guest speakers and different people taking the stage, and we were all chatting with them, about them, disagreeing with them, agreeing with them. And it's something that we both had to apply for. But I think I remember at the time when you were working for the Playground Records, it was also part of it was like slightly work related that you ended up there, right?
I found it by myself.
Yeah.
But then I asked if I could go and educate myself.
Yeah.
At Horst. So I made it
for the label.
For the label. And it was for the label because I at the time while I was working at Playground Music, I did like PR distribution for a lot of foreign labels, which I think there might be some that you know, Excel Recordings. I was doing some of like Domino Records, Ninja Tune. I was doing Pan at the time as well.
Yeah.
480.
I remember you like furiously clacking away on the laptop.
Yeah.
Like,
I was doing a lot of.
We were at the back of the room of this workshop, and you were like, like stressing, sweating, trying to get these promos out at the same time.
But a lot of like British and American labels. So there were quite like big artists that I was still like doing in Finland. I think like one of my favorites was FK Twigs. I was doing her promo in Finland, and I feel like during the week while we were there, I tried to be as effective as possible and work a distance for a week, which I got to know there. And I was just really like determined to have the experience at Horst and not lose my job.
Yes. And you managed.
I managed. And then I did like a little presentation about what I learned.
Yeah, right.
And I learned so much.
So there you go. I think that's some, yeah, that's really an important thing to note upon. I think well, this is applicable in kind of any job, but especially in the creative field, is, you know, like, search out opportunities if you have a job that is within the creative industry, and search out the potential opportunities for things like this, weeks away, workshops, skills training, anything like that. And if you can tie it to your own development and how that will help benefit the place you work, the most, like, not most likely, but the chance, your better chance at getting an opportunity to do something like that. And then from that, it opens up so many extra doors, because from there, we've been friends since then. We've been friends with a group of about 10 or 15 people that we were all at this workshop together, and now everyone has in some form or another, like, leveled up from that experience. And I think it's because we were surrounded by one another and really feeding off the energy of that. And I think sometimes working in isolation in terms of, you know, like self-releasing or just focusing completely on your production or your art, or working at a company, record label, for example, whatever, is fine, but you're seeing the same people day in, day out. And sometimes that bolt of inspiration might not come as easily as it would from a stranger in a group of people when you're randomly in a different place, and you're far more open to new experiences in that moment. And so you're far more likely to learn something and run with it from that point on.
And just kind of a corny way to end that is go outside your comfort zone, because while I was still in high school, none of my friends were interested in music. So when I started going to gigs, I went alone. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in music and event management. So I was really scared. I didn't know, like, how to be a normal person at a bar or like somewhere at a gig alone. I was just standing in a corner trying to, like, look like I'm waiting for a friend. So it's just like sometimes
watch, like, tutting and
so sometimes, like, growing is just really awkward. And I've kind of understood that most of the time when I'm trying to do something new, it feels awkward and scary, and you end up looking stupid. But then again, it's so worth it. For example, this is my first, like, talk of this sort, and I feel like I've been a little bit awkward, and I'm not, like, I don't know where my sentences start and where they go.
But that's also because because we're friends, we're rambling on a lot, which I'm also very conscious of the time. So rambling aside, I would like to discuss a little bit, maybe some comparisons between working for a more independent label in comparison to a major label, and if you could shine a light on the differences and the pros and cons of each.
Sure. I think I've only had experience from working at independent labels, so I can't exactly say what it's like working for a major label, but I'm pretty sure it's the same. From my point of view as a promotion manager, it's the same, because we want the same results. We want playlisting, we want radio, we want news pieces, we want interviews, TV. We all want the same thing. So I think that would be pretty similar. From a label point of view, I think independent labels are more free with going towards more obscure projects, not maybe thinking about, like, it having to be pop, and I think indie labels can take way more risks when it comes to genre and what something sounds like, which I love, because I feel like all the exciting things happen when you step into the obscure. And major labels, I suppose, are more controlled because they're under, like, international labels. We have Sony Music, Universal, Warner. Those are the big trio that kind of rules the industry. So, like, at Sony Finland or Warner Finland or Universal Finland, they still have, like, to follow the bigger international labels and what they do, and kind of try to emulate that, but do it in a Finnish manner. So
So there's a obviously there's a lot, like, reaches a lot more people. It can be a lot more commercially successful, which in turn means more money a lot of the time. But within that, there are huge restrictions because there isn't, like you say, the artistic freedom per se to do something a little bit more weird and interesting. And also as well with working with independent labels, I think artists also understand, and there's like a maybe a greater alignment that this may not make the mega bucks, and may not be chart number one and go platinum or whatever, but this is, you know, like we are giving you the opportunity to really be free in your creativity, and we're not going to limit you and say, no, you're not allowed to do that, and you're signed to us now, and you have to kind of do what we are kind of like not promotion, but our kind of management say you have to do, so to speak.
I feel like indie labels are also a bit smarter with money, because when the money is limited, you have to be really creative, and that's where the best ideas come from. So I feel like it's quite like interesting to talk about money at an indie label, because we have to figure out what to do with not a lot of money.
Well, that's good. So like that, you were telling us just before we started about a campaign that you're working on just now. And I think this is a perfect way to sum up and finish the conversation, and then we'll play a little bit of your mix, and then also the radio video. But if you could just give us, there we go, perfect. So shameless PR, and then you can talk a little bit about the campaign that you're working on.
Okay, I'm gonna plug our artists. Handshaking, amazing house music. Garden Clogs, what an amazing album.
Okay.
And
brilliant.
then we have Rap, Tölen Ketterä, a great grime duo, and Aho, which is the project I'm working on right now. This is the previous album. It's ambient. It's so beautiful.
I love this one. Yeah.
And the project that we're doing right now is we're trying to get promo pictures for Aho for his upcoming album Odyssey, which is out in June. Go listen to it because it's so beautiful. But yeah, we're doing a promo picture shoot for him in a couple of weeks, and we're taking promo pictures of him in like this kind of medieval armor. So my day-to-day doing PR can get a little bit exciting sometimes. With my colleague Amanda, we're working on finding armor for him and trying to build
a massive sword and a shield and
build like a royal room and do it on a budget.
Sounds
but
amazing.
So a lot of the times PR can be a little bit boring and repetitive. And sometimes you end up finding medieval armor. Yeah.
And you have to build a shield out of tinfoil or something like that, and find a backdrop that is only going to cost a couple of quid rather than
exactly.
The millions and billions to spend on budget. Well, Laura, thank you so much. Honestly, this has been so interesting, and your insight is razor sharp as always. I would love to finish with Steve, if we could finish with the video of your last days at Basso, and then we'll finish with the link to the Mixcloud Vanitas radio show. But yeah, once again, Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sharing your experience and your knowledge with us today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure those that have been watching have too. And if you want to follow Laura or PME Records, we'll be linking their social media handles and all the normal bits and bobs in the YouTube upload next week. I will be back next week, this time next week, with Mark Maxwell, a long-term active dance music community member, prolific DJ, record shop manager, and music producer. And we're going to be chatting candidly about the real-life challenges that everyone faces trying to make a career in the music industry. And he has over, I think I'm going to be gentle on this, over 15, but I think it's 20 years experience in the industry. And he's going to be sharing his insight on that. So make sure you tune in for that. But for now, we are going to sign out with a little video and some music from Laura. So thank you once again, Laura.
All right, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Black biisejä. Joo.
Suomen räppäri Torros!
Päälle kiinnostaa kivi. Insta hakee hashtageinä tautien nimi. 9 metriseksi venyvät.
the mall.